To be totally honest, I didn't know that the Copland Third Symphony last movement was a violin excerpt before this project. I think back to the time of my not knowing that with fond nostalgia. This excerpt is no fun. It's not designed to sound good ever, I don't think. It's just to see if you can play hard, fast, loud stuff without messing up. This piece is still under copyright, I think, so I don't think it's asked for quite as much. This isn't in like the orchestraexcerpt.net excerpt book for that reason. You can't really even find it online other than through the New York Phil archives, and even that has a huge watermark on it. If you want to learn it, you have to transcribe it yourself in like an engraving software, or if you're like me, you might have some very generous friends who will share the part that they've already worked out. That's what I'm playing off of, is something that a friend of mine basically wrote in Sibelius. The challenges in this excerpt they're straightforward and they don't become easier over time. The three things that you really are coping with here are the bow stroke, the difficult accent pattern, and the shifting. Within those, there are some variations, but that's sort of the contours of what's challenging about this. So to start, the bow stroke. You're basically doing the same thing for all minute and a half of this excerpt, which is a meaty marcato. You want a lot of guts in the sound and you want a lot of substance. At the same time, you don't want to use too much bow. If you're too conservative, it'll sound choppy and a little insubstantial. And if you're too vigorous, then you might end up throwing your bow across the room or something. So it's sort of tough to establish this in the opening measure. If you go too fast, then you'll quickly figure out that you've gone too fast. There are some places where you might evolve the bow stroke into something a little bit more melodic, like when you have the melody, for example. Even in stuff that's more rhythmically driven, you want to have the same sense of line. So this is measure 35, which is the top of my second page. Not that anyone has my same part to look at, but even this stuff has to have a grammar to it, and it has to go somewhere. This is why you can't be actually too vertical and, again, choppy with the bow stroke. It has to have some length to it. The second big consideration is the accent pattern. This is expected of Copland. It's very dense, the writing with the accents. So I'm trying to bring out all of these accents to show that there's basically one every other note. And this is clearly designed to introduce a rhetoric to the passage that's sort of cumulative. It sounds a little bit to me like reading an iambic pentameter or something, where you have regular stressed and unstressed syllables, but that's not always what's going on with accents, because sometimes it's just on a particular pitch. So you're emphasizing all of the D flats for some reason. And I don't know why it's about pitch. I don't know why D flats are so important that they all have to be accented in this passage. I think it's worth noting that this is a different type of thing. One thing that I did that I would recommend, I can show it to you. This is my part, and you might be able to see that I have colored in the accents in orange. After doing this exercise, I realized that there were 2 or 3 accents that I just wasn't playing at all. It's also nice to know what accents are the most important and which ones are more gestural than actually heard. The last technical challenge is shifting. Copland's obviously not a string player or a violinist. The stuff that he is asking us to do is just annoying and ridiculous. You have these octave Bs. When you're playing it at tempo, which I have written down, quarter note equals 98, it's a treacherous place, and it's easy to miss the shift. What I'm doing here is second position, then shift to 8th, fingered octave. This is what I would call a big awkward shift, of which there are a few in this one. Whenever this comes up, You just have to come up with a shifting strategy, typically like a ghost note. There's definitely an element of chance that is uncomfortable. I can't think of another orchestra excerpt where the like single most likely note that you're gonna miss is the very last note. It just seems cruel. There's just not a great way to get there. There's just a lot of creepy crawling up, and then this big jump that you're gonna have to do. It's a little gymnastic in its execution. That sort of demonstrates the other type of shifting that you have to do, which is the creepy crawly stuff, of which there's a lot of in the 4/flat section. There are no great fingerings for parts of this excerpt, and the result of that is that you end up doing stuff that doesn't feel great, and you end up sort of migrating between positions. There's a lot of stretches of a fifth. God, even as I'm playing it now, it's so hard to play in tune. That's just a feature of this excerpt, is crawling all around the fingerboard, and then that's juxtaposed against these sudden big shifts. One last note about intonation. It's obviously a very difficult excerpt for intonation with the frequent key changes, strange hand frames that you have to play in. Part of it is sort of like this Gordian knot that is just always going to be awkward and inconvenient. The most important, or the organizing principle of intonation in this excerpt, is matching pitches. This is especially true when you have these like octave jumps, even more so than understanding like the modulations and what's the leading tone and what's not. I just think that you have to keep everything in the same place, or it's going to sound out of tune really quickly. It's very easy for this one to sound out of tune. It's just part of the challenge, I guess. So I've said my part about this one. It's obviously not my favorite, but the silver lining that I've come up with is that, as with a lot of Copland, I think this one does grow on you. It's tough to see past the various sub-chores that make this whole excerpt a macro chore. I hope everyone else who has to learn this one is able to find things to enjoy about it, or maybe that you already just like the piece, which is nice. Good for you for liking Copland without trying.